Hello, my name is Ben Grace, and this is my presentation for Sociology 3460. For my final essay, I will be exploring the relationship between social media algorithms and the spread of misinformation during the 2020 US presidential election. Social media algorithms on platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter amplified emotionally charged misinformation on topics like mail-in voting and COVID-19. This amplification allowed political leaders to share public perception and undermined trust in the electoral process while maintaining the illusion that this information was free and open. Although companies have since come under scrutiny by the US government for their handling of misinformation, I aim to argue that stronger and more comprehensive regulation is still necessary. My essay will examine what has been done to reduce misinformation on social media platforms since 2020 and what additional steps could be taken moving forward. I chose my thesis for this paper because the 2020 election was one of the most digitally influenced elections in US history, and its aftermath showed us how much power online platforms have in shaping political belief and behavior. I am interested in the tension between the promise of open information and the reality of what we actually see online being heavily filtered, ranked, and prioritized by algorithms that most users don't even understand. This makes this topic especially relevant to this course's material of pop culture and how media, technology, and discourse influence it. This is a highly controversial issue that has been debated since the early 2010s. Many argue that social media companies have already overstepped, engaging in censorship or restricting political speech. Others believe that platforms have not gone nearly far enough in controlling information, especially regarding false narratives that could threaten democratic institutions. My research is situated within this debate, and my essay takes the position that leans towards stronger regulation, particularly around algorithmic design and transparency. In terms of the positioning I'm developing, my argument is that the core problem isn't just the existence of misinformation, because misinformation has always existed. The deeper issue my essay aims to tackle is that algorithmic amplification of content that is emotionally provocative, polarizing, or misleading. This content's main objective is to generate more comments, shares, not to inform. These algorithms have been optimized for engagement rather than accuracy, and during the 2020 elections, that optimization had drastic political consequences. My essay will be structured into three main sections. First, I will explain how social media algorithms function and how they tend to prioritize emotionally charged content during the 2020 election. This section will draw on scholarly research I discussed in my annotated bibliography, as well as a new source that I have found since writing the bibliography from the National Library of Medicine, titled The Effects of Facebook and Instagram on the 2020 Election, a deactivation experiment. Sources like this, and similar ones from my bibliography, will help me examine algorithmic bias and the political use of online platforms. Second, I will examine the specific misinformation narratives that became widespread during the election, mainly about mail-in voting fraud and the ranges of conflicting health information related to COVID-19, and show how these claims were amplified through platform design. The source that I will be using for this section specifically comes from an essay published by Harvard Kennedy School. The essay's research focuses on Twitter and how public health practices were politicized during the Democratic primaries of the 2020 election. I think this source will be effective for my essay because, one, it is peer-reviewed, and secondly, the authors used a database of over 67 million tweets to compile their findings for this paper. Third, I will assess recent efforts by Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to address misinformation since 2020. For example, some of these platforms have begun to introduce labels, reduce the reach of certain posts, and updated their recommendation systems and collabed more directly with government agencies and independent researchers. While I believe these are steps in the right direction, my sources suggest that these efforts have been inconsistent and are often due to political pressure or public relations concerns. I will argue that the United States still lacks meaningful structural regulations, especially around algorithmic transparency and data access for independent researchers. While developing this outline, I realized that my focus had shifted slightly from where I began in my annotated bibliography. At first, I assumed the central issue was moderation policies, but as I read more, I became more interested in the design of algorithmic systems themselves, how misinformation is not just a moderation failure, but a predictable byproduct of business models built around engagement. This added nuance helped me sharpen my argument and think more critically about what effective regulations would need to be to address this issue. To open up discussion, the question I want to pose is, should social media platforms be treated more like public utilities, entities that require government oversight because they influence democratic participation, or should they continue to be treated as private companies that can determine their own policies? I think this question sits at the heart of the entire debate around regulation. Finally, one area that I have not addressed in this presentation, but may explore in the essay, is the role of artificial intelligence in the 2024 US elections, as AI was not heavily used during 2020. AI generative content such as deepfakes or synthetic political ads were and are still being heavily used by government social media platforms. For example, Trump posting AI videos on Truth Social about Gaza or Chicago. These tools are currently intensifying the challenges that we already face from algorithmic manipulation. And even though I don't believe there is enough information on this to develop into a full section for this essay, I still think it is an important topic for future research. Thank you.